Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux and Gina Buccola here with the Daily Racing Form. This Saturday at Gulfstream Park is Pegasus World Cup Day. And in this preview, we're going to focus on race number 8, the grade 3 Fred Hooper at that 1 turn, 1 mile distance on the main track. But before we get to it, the Fred Hooper is just part of the stakes action on Saturday. 7 graded stakes in total. So if you need your past performances, don't forget to check out shop.drf.com to get those. And kind of the Fred Hooper, Gino, is going to kick off that Rainbow Six, which we know is very popular in South Florida, and a field of 9 here with a couple of big names, I guess. And I think when you look at those big names, they're exiting mainly one race, the Harland Holiday, talking about Rocket Can and Tumbarumba, the top 2 in there. But some interesting faces as well. Little Vic going to race again at Gulfstream Park after finishing 3rd behind who? Mufasa and White Barrio. It's a pretty evenly matched group.
Yeah, and these are the horses who were probably a cut below making the Pegasus World Cup race itself because maybe they were not quite grade 1 caliber, or maybe they want to go a little bit shorter, or maybe they don't want to go the mile and an eighth. So you'll have horses like Rocket Can who they were thinking about running in the Pegasus, but it's probably a much more logical spot here for a horse who doesn't have a real body of work that's been at the graded stakes level. Like, he's been maybe a little disappointing since the Holy Bull win, but that was a big effort from Rocket Can last time out. So coming off of that, he's probably the one they'll all have to beat in here. We know Little Vic is capable of big efforts, but a lot of them have been shorter than this. So we'll see if he wants to go quite this far.
Yeah, and that makes it interesting. You talk about maybe horses coming up, say 6, 7 furlongs. Now they're going to a mile, but that key thing, as I pointed out, 1 turn, 1 mile at Gulfstream Park. And as we look at the time form, U.S. pace projections here, expect a fast pace. You mentioned the name of the number 1, Little Vic. He could be in the action early. The 5, Tumbarumba. This is a horse that also was pretty forward last time out in the Harland's Holiday, and even 2 back in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
I mean, I could see any of the 5 horses they have as the leaders being really close to it. Even you look at Northern Flame, who's going to be fresh, who's coming off of a layoff, hasn't raced since July. That horse could want to be on the engine. Upstanding got the lead. I don't know if he's naturally as fast as some of the others in here, but because being on the front end worked out so well, I'd imagine they want to be pretty close to the front end. Cape Trafalgar from the outside, I'm hoping he sits a little bit in here, but it's not like he wants to be too far out of it. So a lot of these horses want to be within a couple lengths early.
We'll move to the number 1 here, Little Vic, to kick things off, and we'll kick it off with his performance last time out in the grade 3 at Mr. Prospector. And on paper, I feel like all eyes were on White Barrow, using that race as a prep race for what would be the Pegasus World Cup. And Mufasa ended up being very controlling towards the front of the pack. White Barrow had trouble at the break. And I think when you look at what Little Vic is able to do, he sort of stalked the pace throughout, and he tried. He doesn't really miss second by a whole lot here.
This was a great effort from Little Vic from perspective, right? What we were expecting from him, he was 70-1 in that race, and he just hadn't been coming in off of some of his better efforts. And he was right there closing with your Breeders' Cup Classic winner from a couple years ago, and behind another nice horse in Mufasa. So, yeah, it's very strange. This is one of the things as a handicapper that I have a tough time with, because he's coming into this race off of one of his better efforts. That was really good, but this is not necessarily his game, going a mile, a 1 turn mile, going a little bit longer. So I have these like mixed feelings and conflicting signals here, but I really respect what he did in that last race.
Yeah, it's tough to assess, right? Look down the page how far he's ever gone. Mile and an eighth and a mile and 16th, and it was a long time ago, as you mentioned. But a little promising to see him on the right track with that last out effort. The 2, Implementation. Curious to get your thoughts on him. A turf sprinter now returning to the dirt, and it's not like he doesn't have dirt experience, but he's got a little bit of a layoff. We've only seen him once since early September.
Yeah, his last win was in August of 2023 when you're talking about dirt wins. And so he's
Mhm.
0 for his last 7 races on the dirt. Some of the turf form isn't bad, and I think you can honestly do worse if you're looking for bottom of the exotics types horses. I feel like this horse might get dismissed a little bit. People might just kind of poo-poo and think is more of a turf horse. But like you said, if you go into some of the dirt races, while there aren't a lot of wins, if you're looking for a horse that might offer you some value in the under spots and the exotics, I think this might be one of them.
The number 3 in here, Rocket Can, he was able to win the grade 3 Harland's Holiday last time out. As we take a look at that performance, it's a different race. It's a mile and a 16th, so 2 turns at Gulfstream. And he got a great trip here from Junior Alvarado, just a couple of lengths off the pace, sitting a little bit towards the back of the pack and sort of then rating towards mid-pack. And it's going to be a stretch battle here, as you can see. He's in the mix. Tumbarumba was forwardly placed here, and neither one really wants to give an inch, and Rocket Can then ends up drawing clear.
And he was 10-1 coming into that race because his form just was not great. He won the Holy Bull and he was second in the Fountain of Youth. And coming off of those races as a 3-year-old, I think we all kind of were expecting him to just grow up a little bit, to mature. When he was 4, he's going to be a better, bigger, older horse. And he didn't really progress all that much. But I think the one thing now we can really take from his form, Ashley, after that last race, he loves Gulfstream Park. Look at the 3 races he has at Gulfstream Park. He won the Holy Bull, he won the Harland Holiday, and he was second in the Fountain of Youth behind Forte. So that's his body of work at Gulfstream Park. Maybe he's a real horse for course who likes it there, because that was a big effort from him. Can he put 2 in a row together, though? Can he go right back? You're going to have to take a much shorter price on him on Saturday.
I just want to ask you a quick question about Rocket Can. Do you have any concerns with him now cutting back? He's going to go to a one-turn distance, and
Yep.
you mentioned those races at Gulfstream. I love them. I'm just like you. I think he loves Gulfstream, but they've all been around 2 turns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And he made a big sweeping move, right? And those are better moves at 2 turns a lot of the time. Also, looking at the way the race shapes up, it probably has enough speed to set up for him. Probably a horse from off the pace, but he can get behind. He can get a little bit lazy in his races. So again, last time was probably the time to bet him. I think he is the horse to beat, but maybe not the horse to bet at a much shorter price.
The 4 Northern Flame now going to make the first start for the new connections. You can see last time we saw him was the Iowa Derby, where he was the pace setter, ended up finishing 3rd, but then he went to the auction ring back in October. He fetched $125,000, and you can see he's been at Palm Meadows for quite some time, working there since coming in from New York, and sort of an interesting type. I mean, he's technically eligible for non-winners of 3 life, but his last out performance was okay.
Yeah, he's overall form really isn't bad. I think he's just such a wild card, not having raced since July. He's going to be sort of feel like he's starting over here, kind of like the starting point. See what we have. We'll put him in this race at a 1-turn mile because it's kind of like in the middle spot where it's more than a sprint. It's not quite one of these classic longer races. So I'm definitely going to be watching him because I'd love to see a good third, fourth place effort from him, and then can build on that moving into other stakes races throughout the year.
The 5 Tumbarumba we saw was second behind a Rocket Can in the Harland Holiday last time out. A little bit of an interesting thing going on here, though, Gino. Blinkers come off. He's raced with them for quite some time consecutively. Last time without blinkers, you're going all the way back to February of 23 on the turf at Gulfstream. And I wonder if that's because of 2 things, and curious to get your thoughts. Cutting back in distance, but maybe having him with the blinkers off will allow him to rate a little bit better if needed.
Exactly. When you watch his races, he's so tough, he's so honest, but it's like he's fighting you the whole race. I think sometimes the jockey as well as his opponents in the race, if he could just take back a little bit, he's so honest and he doesn't ever want to give in. I mean, you look at his form overall, he's finished second in 5 of his last 6 races. And the only time he didn't finish second, he was actually a pretty good 4th in one of his better races in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So you can't really knock the recent form. He's just not necessarily a win machine, but I do like that they're making a change here, right? Can we assess his form and say, are they doing something where we can expect maybe a different result? Yes, they are taking the blinkers off, and I completely agree with you. I think the hope is, can he just relax a little bit, sit back off? Can he maybe sit 3rd in here instead of having to battle all the way around the track? Because that softens him up a little bit late in the stages.
The 6 Instant Coffee making the return to South Florida, where this one only had 1 prior start at Gulfstream Park, and more recently has focused on sort of the Mid-Atlantic and New York. And last time out was 4th in the Queen's Country, but that's at a mile and an eighth over a sloppy track. Another one that's going to cut back in distance. And I think from a figure standpoint, fits Gino, but I feel like those races 2 and 3 back, he needed to show more, at least for me to use him here.
Completely agree. Like you said, on those races graded out well on speed figures, but based on the company he was facing, I still want to see a little bit more. He's a multiple graded stakes winner, but he's over his last 8. So he was very precocious and early on in his career at the end of 2 and early into 3. In that last stretch of 8 races, he's been beaten double digits in half of those races. So he's just not in the best of form right now.
The number 7, Upstanding. I don't know what to do with this horse. I'm going to be really honest. When I look at Upstanding, you see a horse that's kind of hitting the door at breaking the maiden. And then when he finally does, it's at Gulfstream Park, it's at the mile distance, and he wins by 9. But it's a field of maidens. I don't know what to do with him here. Obviously, that figure gives him the right to be in a spot like this. And I trust the connections and knowing what they're doing. But I have some question marks, and the fact that Brad Ortiz goes to a different horse here.
You were probably inside of my head because I was doing the same thing you were. I was like, I don't know what to do with him. You respect the connections. I respect the effort he put out last time, but that was against so much of a softer group. And if you just look at the fractions, I mean, he got out front, he slowed it down, he controlled everything. Is he going to be able to do that again in this race against horses who have gone like 2 seconds faster to the half mile than what he was doing last time out? So, would it shock me to see him run well in here? No, but I think you're probably going to get a little shorter price than you would want on him just based on his resume so far. I have him as more of an underneath type in here, Ashley.
Yeah, you bring up a great point from a price perspective. You don't know what you're going to get. He might be a little overbet here, and it wouldn't be shocking to see him with a huge performance. And he has had some excuses in those races in New York, but maybe a horse that I think, depending what we see the odds at, are kind of closer to post time. Then you decide really how to assess him. The 8 Bourbon Resolve, a 5-year-old son of Hardspun, was able to win last time out, and that was at Churchill, going a mile and a 16th. He's 0 for 4 at Gulfstream, but he's had some okay performances, and he actually has to face one of those rivals once again.
Yeah, he's probably one of the true deeper closers in here. I think you know what you're going to get from him if they line up across the track, like the pace projector showed. There's a possibility of that. That's where you get a little excited if you played Bourbon Resolve, a first time versus stakes company, so they'll step up off of that good win last time out. I think you'll just expect him to drop back and make that one late run.
And then finally in the field, the number 9 here for Safi Joseph Jr. Now, he was 4th in the Harland Holiday, sort of chased throughout, and maybe needed that race. He looks like a horse, to me at least, Gino, that's had a little bit of kind of setbacks. We haven't seen him in consistent races, so I think this is kind of a positive sign from that camp.
Yeah, these are horses I like to kind of bet on the win end when you know they have a ceiling or they have a high upside, but they're not just consistent because they've kind of gone in and out of form. Cape Trafalgar had consistent races where he'd race, then he'd be off for a couple months. He'd race, then he'd be off for a couple months. Race, off for a few months. I love the fact that he's able to string a couple together. He moves to the outside. He was drawn to the inside last time out, and he got stuck kind of in between horses. He tried to get off the rail to the 2 path, and he really couldn't get through. He was in an uncomfortable spot. He had to back out of it. I don't think he was ever going to win that race, but he could have been a lot closer there. So I feel like at the outside, keeping him in the clear, Irad is aboard. I feel like he'll be fit in here. I think he's going to show up with a really good account of himself.
All right, that's the field of 9 for the grade 3 Fred Hooper. As we move to top pick time, curious to see who you use. The horse you just talked about. You go to the outside here, who might offer a little bit of value.
Yeah, that's the key because I do think the 3 Rocket Can is probably the one they'll all have to hold off in here. I respect a couple others in here, but I look at Cape Trafalgar. Maybe can he sit 3rd or 4th from the outside, not have to get shuffled back like he was kind of in between horses. Irad's aboard, strong finisher there. So I put the 9 on top of the 3, 5, and the 7.
And I think we view this race similarly. I think when you kind of look at last out, the Harlan Holiday, in terms of a race as a whole, it's going to be probably productive. And when you look at the top 2 in there, Tubarumba and Rocket Can, maybe there's different cases to be made for each of them. I had a tough time here. I typically don't like horses that have that second-itis like Tubarumba, but I think the blinkers coming off and the cutback is key. I think that was a strategic decision last time out by Brian Lynch to say, you know what, we're going to go a mile and a 16th. We're going to push the envelope and then see what happens on the cutback. So 9-3-5-7 for Gino, 5-3-1-2 for me. It's race 8 this Saturday at Gulfstream. The Fred Hooper. Best of luck.